Hi, I'm Matt Andrzejewski, and I'll be your instructor for Psych 444 this semester. Principles of Behavior Modification, I think, is the official title of the course, but really I think this course is an introduction to Applied Behavior Analysis, or ABA. I think that's the contemporary view in an appropriate view for behavior change and behavior modification strategies today. So that's what I'm going to be teaching. I am a behavior analyst, as I'm going to talk a little bit about. So this lecture, I want to review the goals of the course briefly, tell you a little bit about myself and how I'm qualified to teach this course, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about what to expect in the course format. So the goals of the course, at the end of the course, you should be able to do a variety of things, including describe and discussing principles of behavior analysis, describe potential advantages and disadvantages and the ethical use of behavior change strategies, develop descriptive and measurable definitions for observable behavior, describe and identify a variety of methods of measuring behavior, identify potential controlling variables of behavior, identify methods of testing for functional relationships between behavior and controlling variables, identify strategies for increasing and decreasing behavior, and measure and demonstrating changes in behavior and controlling variables. So these, as you'll notice, are behavioral objectives, and that is they identify things that you should be able to do when you're done, behaviors that you should be able to engage in. Now, some of them may seem silly, but as we're going to get into it, it becomes there's some issues involved in a lot of these things, and some limitations and problems that we're going to be confronting. It may sound like it's really easy to measure behavior, but it turns out that in some contexts it's not so easy, and we're going to talk about a number of different things. So those are the goals of the course. As I said, I'm going to be teaching this course from a behavior analytic, or a perspective from behavior analysis. Behavior analysis was founded by, we often appeal to B.F. Skinner as the father of behavior analysis, so to speak. There were other people that were heavily involved in this. John Watson certainly laid the groundwork for modern behavior analysis. Nat Schoenfeld and others or Fred Keller were involved in the founding of a tradition we call behavior analysis. The founding journal goes back to 1954. The Journal of Experimental Analysis of Behavior, and the Journal of Applied Behavior Analysis was founded in the late 60s. So these are somewhat long-lasting and long-term philosophies and scientific endeavors and so on. B.F. Skinner had a student named Dick Herrnstein. He's somewhat of a controversial figure, but he was very important in behavior analysis. He developed the matching law. He did important work on concept formation. He was a very, very talented experimental psychologist. In fact, he got his PhD at Harvard University, then became a professor at Harvard University, which is really unheard of. That's not heard of. He's somewhat controversial because late in life, actually, it was published after he died. He's an author in a book called The Bell Curve, which is a pretty controversial book about intelligence testing and so on. Herrnstein had a student named Phil Heinlein. Phil's expertise, Heinlein's expertise, was generally speaking in negative reinforcement. And Phil was my professor at Temple University, so that's a picture of me without glasses. So I'm a direct descendant, so to speak, intellectually, at least academically, of B.F. Skinner. I came to behavior analysis late, though. I was not a psychology major as an undergraduate. I was a history major, an education major, and I came to behavior analysis after my undergraduate training. Actually was working that I was introduced to behavior analysis and grew from there. So this is my family tree, but there's a lot of associated family people. My other mentor, my postdoctoral mentor, was a woman named Ann Kelly. She died about 13 years ago now from cancer. She was a neuroscientist, a behavioral neuroscientist. So much of what I do also incorporates some aspects of neuroscience or drug studies in it. It's funny that I knew Anne because Anne also helped train Dr. Warsinski, who you might have had for learning and conditioning in Psych 303. If you didn't have me for Psych 303, you probably had Meg, Dr. Warsinski. Dr. Warsinski and Anne were not only friends and colleagues and mentor-mentee, but go way back, in fact, even to Meg's graduate school days when she babysat for Ann Kelly's kids, which is really funny. We found this out after we met and after we knew each other a while. I didn't know that there was a link. I worked with Ann for almost 7 years. So Dr. Warsinski also it was a contemporary at Harvard with a guy named Jim Mazur. And this is a picture of Jim Mazur. And if you guys remember from Psych 303, the learning and behavior textbook that you used was by a guy named James Mazur. Well, that's him. That's him. So it turns out that Mazur was also a student of Dick Herrnstein's. He's a little bit younger than Phil. They were never contemporaries. This is a picture of Howard Rocklin, who was also a student of Dick Herrnstein's. Rocklin produced a couple of other people, including down the family line, including a former professor at UW-Whitewater. So I had their picture. But the family is even broader than that, intellectually, academically, and that is, this is a picture of Art Glenberg. And if any of you had Psych 215 statistics with me, you know that Art Glenberg and myself wrote a textbook called Learning from Data. One of Art Glenberg's graduate students was Dr. Havis. So we're a big, happy family. So that's my intellectual background. My studies with Heinlein included studies on the matching law, on optimal foraging, on the relationship between Pavlovian and operant conditioning, extended timescales. We had a very dynamic lab. Phil, at the time that I was there, we had 4 or 5 graduate students, many undergraduates working. We had 60 to 80 pigeons running every day, doing experiments related to the work going on in there. So Ann's lab was also a very dynamic lab. There were many graduate students, many postdocs at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. Anne has, I think, over 250 publications in neuroscience. She was a very dynamic and wonderful person to work for. Learned a lot from her. So that's intellectually who I am. Now, I'm qualified to teach this course because before I went back to graduate school in 1996 or so, I spent about 7 years working in the field of applied behavior analysis, or working with people that had some behavior challenges, we should say. In some cases, they needed to learn how to do things. In other cases, we needed them to learn how to not do some things. So I worked at a place called the Specialized Living Center, which was a residential facility for adults with developmental disabilities in southwestern Illinois. And I worked there for a couple of years, and then I worked for a couple of years for the Department of Mental Health and the Bell Fountain Habilitation Center outside of St. Louis, Missouri. And then my wife and I moved to Delaware, and then in Delaware I worked for a school called the Chimes, based in Baltimore, and there we worked with adults with autism, with Prader-Willi syndrome, and with other very challenging, severe behaviors. So I've been consultant for a number of agencies and operations around Wisconsin and Delaware and Pennsylvania and so on. I'm a former president of the Wisconsin Association for Behavior Analysis. I've been a member of the Association for Behavior Analysis International for over 20 years. I received my master's degree in applied behavior analysis from Temple University, and I did 2 internships in that. While I was working, actually, one internship was at the Delaware Autistic Program. We might read a little bit about the picture exchange communication system that was developed there. And I also spent some time at the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia doing functional and experimental analyses of problem behavior. And then I also did an internship at the Thomas Jefferson University Narcotics Addiction Research Program. In fact, my graduate thesis was conducted at a substance abuse treatment center. So I have a couple of publications in the applied behavior analytic world. One was this paper in a small journal called Prader-Willi Perspectives. This is a genetic disorder, Prader-Willi syndrome. It's very rare, but I got to work with 5 individuals with Prader-Willi syndrome in Delaware, and we used some behavior analytic change strategies with them and published a small paper on that. I also published in Drug and Alcohol Dependence, was a very, very prominent journal in drug and alcohol use. My master's thesis with Kim Kirby. Kim was my master's thesis advisor. I should put her on my family tree. She's a wonderful person. She's at still in Philadelphia, I believe, working in that field. So that gives you a little background of me. What are we going to be doing in this class? So briefly, it's completely online, and what you're going to be doing is working from unit to unit. So I have the course divided into units. There are 15 units. There are 15 weeks, so roughly we're going to be doing 1 unit per week. Now, what is in a unit? Well, a unit or a module in Canvas has an assignment page with an overview of that assignment for the unit, preparation guide, which is a focused guide of questions for your reading. There's going to be a wiki, which is a shared resource to which you all will contribute. There's going to be a poll, and a poll is an ungraded quiz in which you're going to tell me what you don't understand and what you liked and what you didn't like. And then there's something called a check for understanding, and that is, it's a brief quiz. It's ungraded, but you have to score at least 8 out of 10 in order to proceed to the next unit. Also on these modules are going to be lectures and videos and links to resources that you can engage for a deeper, broader, greater understanding of the material. Your grades are going to be based on wiki contributions. There's 1 point per wiki when it's on time, and reduced credit for late submissions. About every 2 weeks, we're going to be having a probe or a quiz. I call it a probe rather than a quiz because I give you the questions ahead of time, so you should know how to answer them. They're going to cover 2 units. There's going to be 6 of them, but only the best 5 count, and they're going to be worth 10 points or 10% each. And then there's the final paper, which is 35% of your grade, in which you're going to choose a technique or procedure or something in applied behavior analysis. You're going to write about it and summarize 10 empirical papers. So I think that's it for the introduction. You can go ahead and dive in on Canvas and look for your first assignment. I think it should be self-explanatory. If you have any questions, please drop me an email. And if we need to contact each other, we can. I won't be having physical office hours, but we can speak virtually through any number of means. So welcome to the course. Look forward to having a good semester.